to another sewing tutorial. My name is Ann-Sophie and I'm the person behind Sewing with Solana, and it's called Sewing with Solana because I have a clothing brand called Solana Handmade. And the reason why this is called Solana, I get quite a few messages lately, why Solana, so I thought I'm just going to tell you the story very quickly. I was in New Zealand a few years ago and I was in a cafe, and I don't remember if the cafe was called Sola or Solana. But after that trip, I always told myself, if I'm ever going to have a daughter, I'm going to name her Solana, just because that name, I don't know, it just reminds me of summer, sunshine, and to me it's just a beautiful and a happy name. So once I started my brand, I was like, okay, for sure I'm going to have to name it Solana. So yeah, that's the story behind the name. And today's tutorial, we're going to be working with 3 meters of linen fabric, and we're going to see how many pieces of clothing we can make with 3 meters. I want to make some tops, maybe a skirt. I don't have a plan yet, so I think we're just going to go project by project, and I think this is going to be fun. I love days like this where I just have 3 meters of fabric and I just want to make some pieces of clothing that I can wear over Christmas time. So yeah, let's see what we can make. And also for today's video, I'm going to be using this linen fabric that I got from an Etsy shop called Linen Dream Shop. And I found them last year, 1.5 years ago actually, when I was so desperately looking for good linen. I was struggling so much finding good linen fabric. I love working with linen, but either the linen I found was too thin or too thick, or they didn't have nice colors. And then I somehow ended up on Etsy. I never expected that I would find a good little fabric supplier on Etsy, but then I found this place, ordered a bunch of samples, loved the samples, and then from then on I always ordered big amounts of fabric for them for my clothing brand. And it's also the fabric that I use for the Leah dress in the color sand. But yeah, I reached out to them and told them that I want to make a YouTube tutorial using their fabric, so they were so kind to gift me 3 meters of their fabric, and they also gave me a discount code for you, which is only valid for a month. I'm gonna put it in the description. But yeah, I'm so excited to be working with this color. It's such a beautiful color. I don't know, like I never used to wear a lot of colorful pieces, I think, but look at this. I feel like a sunflower or a sun. So yeah, let's get started. It's gonna be a chaotic day. Not a chaotic day, but a busy day, but I love those days. So let's go and let's see what we can make with 3 meters of fabric. The project for today is gonna be a crop top. And to make it, you need your bust measurement. You need to wrap it around the widest part of your bust, and you still need to be able to move the measuring tape around a bit, so don't make it too tight and don't make it too loose. For me, that's 87 centimeters. And today, instead of adding seam allowance, we're going to take away a couple centimeters. Trust me, once you try it on, you'll understand why. So my measurement is 87 centimeters, and I'm going to take away 2 centimeters to make it 85 centimeters. So we need to cut out a long piece of fabric. Mine is going to be 85 centimeters long, and now we need to figure out how wide we want it to be. And I want mine to be 20 centimeters wide, and then we need to add some seam allowance to that, 4 centimeters in total, which is going to be 24 centimeters. So my pattern piece is going to be 85 centimeters long and 24 centimeters wide. And I already made my pattern piece, which is going to look like this, and depending on your measurements, yours is going to look pretty similar. And we now need to cut this out once, and then we also need a long strap of fabric because we need to make a long strap to tie the top in the end. So I'm going to make mine the whole width of the fabric, and then I'm going to make it 5 centimeters wide. The thing we're going to do now is we're going to cut out the long piece of fabric that's 5 centimeters wide and has the complete width of the fabric. So I'm just folding my fabric in half, and now I'm taking my measuring tape and I'm just gonna make some 5 centimeter marks on it, and then I'm gonna cut it out. So this is what it's gonna look like. And next up we take our pattern piece that we have just made from our own measurements, and we're gonna place it on top of the fabric, pin it to the fabric, and then we're gonna cut it out once. just want to show you how I'm gonna test which sewing thread I'm gonna use, because I don't have a thread that matches the color 100%. So either I'm having this one that's a bit more golden, or I have this pale yellow. I think I'm gonna go, what do you think? I think I'm gonna go for the more golden option here. I think this one is too pale, and I think this golden one is gonna look a bit nicer. So next up we need to sew our strap, and it depends a bit how wide you want yours to be. I want mine to be quite thin. So we're going to take it and then we fold it in half. And I'm going to be sewing mine with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, which means here the fabric is folded. So I'm going to do the stitching 1 centimeter away from the fold. And then we're going to cut off the excess fabric, and then we're going to flip it inside out. So now you can either take a safety pin and pin it in one end and then push it all the way through to the other end, but I'm going to be using my loop turner, which makes it a bit faster. So I'm going to take it and push it all the way through till it comes out on the other side. And now I'm pushing this little metal thing through the fabric. And now I close it, and now slowly I'm pushing the fabric until this comes out, and now we're just going to pull it all the way. So this is what it looks like now, and now we're just going to put it to the side, and we're going to move to the actual part of the top. The first thing we need to do now is we take our top, and basically what we need to do is we need to hem the top and the bottom of it. So we're just going to start on one side, we're going to fold it down 1 centimeter and then 1 centimeter again, and then we're going to sew it, and then we're going to do the same to the bottom of the top. And now we're going to be doing the same to the other side. Fold it down 1 centimeter and 1 centimeter again. next up we have to go over to our iron because we have to iron the ends down and then down again. We could also just pin it, but I feel like it looks a bit nicer when we first iron this part. But yeah, we're gonna iron it and then we're gonna go over to our sewing machine and then we're already finished. This is really so simple and so easy to make. So this is our finished top now. It doesn't look very wearable yet, but to make it wearable, we need to take our long strap and we're just gonna start pulling it in here and then through here so it comes out here again. And you can either do it with a safety pin or I'm just gonna use my loop turner again. And here we have our finished top. So now that we have finished sewing our top, it's time to make a matching bottom for it. And I want to make a maxi skirt. And I know that my last YouTube tutorial was also a maxi skirt, but this one is going to be different. This one is going to be bias cut without any gathers or anything. Like, it's just going to be a very simple, straight, slim fitting skirt. I've made it as a mini before, never as a maxi. So if you want to make the skirt as a mini, you can just make it shorter. I hope it's going to turn out the way I want it to. We'll see. I think it's going to be fun doing it together. And my vision for this is because like the top is very like, it's super cropped, super like shows a lot of skin. I want to have something long for the bottom piece. And the reason why I don't want to make a skirt as in my last tutorial is just because I want it to look a bit more elegant. But yeah, let's go and try it. The thing is, we're gonna make a sewing pattern for it. Usually I always use brown packaging paper, I guess, but there's a store close by to me, but it's so expensive. So what I've decided now to do in the last days, I've always just been using baking paper and gluing the pieces together, which works perfectly, and it's so easy also to pin it to the fabric. So yeah, I don't know, like it's a random thing to do, I guess, but it works very well. So if you don't have any paper rolls at home, just go to your kitchen, grab your baking paper and glue the pieces together. And for this, you're gonna need two measurements. You're gonna need your waist measurement and your hip measurement. And then you also need to figure out how long you want the skirt to be, depending if you want to have it as a mini, maxi, or maybe as a midi skirt. My waist right now is 72 centimeters. My hip is 98 centimeters. And then the distance measured from my waist to my hips is 25 centimeters. And then I think I want my skirt to be around 107 centimeters long. So for this skirt, we're not going to be sewing in a zipper, because I don't like sewing in zippers, to be honest. And instead we're going to cut the pattern and the fabric on bias, which means instead of putting the sewing pattern straight on the fabric, we're going to lay it at a 45-degree angle. And this is then automatically going to make the fabric a bit more stretchy. And it also makes the fabric fall super, super nicely. The only downside of it is that you use up a bit more fabric. So there will be maybe a bit more fabric scraps, but there's always so many other cool projects that you can use those little fabric scraps for. Maybe I can make another tutorial for that actually. But yeah, also one thing I want to say, it took me a long time to figure out this sewing pattern. So what I would recommend you to do is maybe add a few more centimeters at the beginning, and then before you overlock it, try it on, see how it fits, and then you can always make it smaller. It's just really hard when you make it too small then to add fabric. So always, number one tip, always add a few more centimeters at the beginning. You can always make it shorter and smaller after. First I made a long line along here, which is going to be for the waist, and my waist is 72 centimeters, and then we divide it by 2 because one time is going to be the front, one time the back, and that is 36. And then we're going to add 4 centimeters just for seam allowance and just to make sure we have enough space to pull the skirt over our hips. So that's going to be 40, and because I folded my paper in half, we can divide it by 2 again, so it's going to be 20 centimeters. So we're going to take our measuring tape, and then we're going to measure this first line for the waist and make a mark at 20 centimeters. And next up we're going to measure the distance from the waist to the hips, and for me that was 25 centimeters. So now I'm going to measure from my waistline 25 centimeters down all along here, and I'm going to make some marks along here. So 25 centimeters, and I'm just going to make a little line. And then at the end I'm just going to connect them to make another line, which is going to be the line for my waist. For my hips. And now we're going to be doing the same again. So my hip is 98 centimeters, and then we're going to divide it by 2 again, one time for the front, one time for the back. And for me that's 49 centimeters. And then we're going to add 4 centimeters again, so that's going to be 53 centimeters. And again, because I folded my paper in half, we can divide that by 2 again, which is 26.5 centimeters. So we need to make sure that this hip line is 26.5 centimeters long. And now we need to connect the mark of the hips and of the waist. And if you want to, you can first take your measuring tape and just draw a straight line. But at the end we don't want it to be a straight line, we want it to be a bit round. But sometimes I feel like it's easy when you first have a straight line and then you can go along the straight line and just make sure you round it off. And what we also need to do now, we need to go to the middle of the waist where the paper is folded, and we're gonna measure 2 centimeters down from here. And we also need to make a curved line like this. Now, because I want my skirt to be 107 centimeters long, I'm gonna measure from the waistline here 110 centimeters down, because that will include seam allowance. So I'm just gonna lay my measuring tape here and then make some marks along here, all along here, and then I connect them and make a straight line again. And for this line, I'm just gonna measure 28 centimeters. I just want it to be a little bit wider than my waist so I can still walk around. And now I just need to connect the end of the skirt with my waistline. And I'm also going to do it again in a slightly curved way. There's one thing I want to mention here at this step. My paper is folded in half and I measured the end of the skirt only 28 centimeters because I really want my skirt to be slim fitting and I want it to be kind of like a mermaid style, if you know what I mean. But if you want your skirt, if you want to have more movement in your skirt, I would really recommend adding a few more centimeters right here. So here is what the sewing pattern looks like now. Every time you make your own sewing pattern, I would really recommend writing all the information you need on it, just so when you want to use it next time, you really know what the sewing pattern is for. So I just wrote that this is my yellow bias cut maxi skirt and that I need to cut it out twice. And here I marked the grain line at a 45-degree angle, so I really know that I need to cut it on bias. So now we need to cut out the skirt and yeah, cut it out 2 times, both on bias. So make sure you don't put the sewing pattern straight on the fabric, but put it at a 45-degree angle. And yeah, cut it out 1 time for the front and 1 time for the back, and then we can come back and start sewing. Now that we have cut out the front and the back, we're gonna lay them on top of each other and we're gonna pin along the sides, both of the sides, and then we're gonna sew it with our normal sewing machine. And then we're gonna go over to our iron and press the seam open, and then I'm gonna overlock it. And if you don't have an overlock machine, you can just use your normal sewing machine at a zigzag option. And yeah, we're doing this because we don't want the fabric to fray. Now we go over to our iron and we're gonna press the seams that we have just sewn open. And now it's time for the elastic. My elastic is 2.5 centimeters wide, and I'm just gonna wrap it around my waist to figure out how tight I want mine to be. And I'm gonna make mine 63 centimeters long. And the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our elastic and then we're gonna overlap the two ends. And I'm just gonna take a safety pin and pin it together. And now we can go to our sewing machine, and I'm gonna set mine to a zigzag stitch, and I'm just gonna go back and forth a couple times just to make sure it's really secure. Now I'm taking my elastic and I'm folding it in half here where we've sewn it together, and then on this other side I'm gonna stick a needle inside. And then we're gonna match the seam and the needle up, and then on this side I'm gonna stick a needle and I'm gonna do, oops, and I'm gonna also stick a needle on this side. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the waist of our skirt. We already have the 2 marks here where the seams are. So I'm going to line them up. And now I'm going to stick a needle on this side. And also a needle on this side. So what we are going to do now is we're going to have the good side facing us, and by good side I mean where we don't see any of the stitches. And now we're going to take the elastic, and every time when there's a pin or there's a seam we're going to line it up. So we're just going to start here in the middle, we're going to line the 2 pins up and stick one in here, and then we're going to line this pin with the seam here up. And now we're gonna do this here. And now I would recommend cutting, the excess thread off here. And what we're going to do now, we're going to sew this with the overlock machine onto the fabric, but if you don't have an overlock machine, you can just do it with your normal sewing machine as well. And one thing you have to do now, while you sew, you're going to need to stretch the elastic out. Oh, and also one thing, I'm going to lift up my knife. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to our normal sewing machine and we're going to do a stitch super close to the edge here, all the way around. There's only one step left now, and we need to hem the skirt. But before we do that, I would recommend to put the skirt on, just to figure out how long you want your skirt to be, how long you want your hem to be. So yeah, put it on, and then we come back and hem our skirts. So my skirt is a bit too long, but I really like the way it fits. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a pin into the fabric where I want my skirt to stop, and then before cutting the excess fabric off, I'm going to make sure to add 2 centimeters to that for the seam allowance. I have actually now decided to wrap this video up. I have enough fabric left to make another top, and I know exactly what kind of top I want to make. I posted about this top on Instagram quite a few times, and I know so many of you want a sewing pattern for it. I call it the Cassie top, and I'm gonna release a sewing pattern for it in January or February. I think it would be way too complicated to explain to you how to make the sewing pattern, and this video is already long enough, I think. So yeah, I really want to save the fabric for this tutorial for the Cassie top. And if you have any questions, and if like maybe some steps that I showed you today were unclear, please let me know, and please keep sending me photos of you guys wearing the pieces that we have made together. It makes me so happy seeing that. And also I'm self-taught, like I watch so many YouTube videos to learn stuff, and I have some Skillshare classes. But if you have any tips for me, if there's some things I'm doing that you would do differently, please also let me know. I'm always so happy when I hear, like when I get some tips. So yeah, I think that's it for today's video, and I'll see you next week for another sewing tutorial. Bye!